and we talked this for the show with JT Realmuto, it's not like there's Bichette and nobody else. Like there's a lot of good players here that you can get who are not, Bo Bichette. So do we want to talk about Javi Baez at all? Because he's kind of a weird one too, uh, and much cheaper than Bichette, but he's just somebody I think the more that I look at, the more I don't want to say I'm scared, but I guess I'm a little reluctant about him.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I think of him this year kind of next to, well, they are being drafted right next to each other, Baez versus Torres. And I think the argument for Baez there is the possibility of some speed where you don't really have that with Gleiber. But yeah, I think the swing and miss has always been an issue. Even he's hit well enough that he can make up for it in average just by hitting the ball so hard. He was one of the players who openly complained about the lack of in-game video. We know that's coming back, so that's right. A point in his favor, if indeed that was, an actual reason for a dip in performance. I believe it more with Baez than with JD Martinez, I think, just because Baez is, he does have a lot of swing and miss, and I think that he probably does benefit from watching what pitchers are doing and to kind of make adjustments in game. I favor Torres, over Baez, I think, very clearly. I think if Baez falls maybe 15 to 20 picks from his ADP, I might be okay with that. But I'm a little nervous. I'm also a little nervous because the Cubs are in full teardown too, it seems. So we don't know really what's going to go on with that team context. So I feel a lot better about drafting a Yankee in a vacuum than I do a Cub. So yeah, I get the argument for him. I'm kind of a little cool at this ADP.
Yeah, my other thing about Baez is like you always think of him having speed. I think he's only stolen like more than 12 bases once. So it's kind of one of those things where if I thought Baez could maybe steal 20, then it's a different thing and you kind of accept the warts. But if he's only going to steal 10 to 12, then it's like, I still like him. And I'm not as low as you are on him, but at his current ADP, which is, sitting like in the 5th round, it's like, I think I'd rather wait. And I agree with you. I'd rather have Torres and kind of play in that high end power upside on a good team, in a good park than with Baez on a potentially mediocre team, if not worse, in a park that isn't nearly the power park that it is. So let's go to the 3-star tier. There's 4 names here, but I think we want to talk about at least 3 of them. One of them is somebody I think we both like. So there's Dansby Swanson, Carlos Correa, Marcus Semien, and Didi Gregorius. So let's talk about the player that we both really like, and that's Dansby Swanson. So, John, I think you were on this train before I was. So what about Swanson excites you?
Just that when he's been healthy, he's just been a really steady producer. He's in a good lineup for accumulation. I think he's close to a lock to be a 2010 player if he stays healthy all year. The point I made in my target piece for Swanson was that if you take out the latter 2 months of 2019, when he was mostly playing through a heel injury, it sort of conveniently totals up to, if you include the first part of 2019 and last season, it adds up to 160 games, and he put together 27 homers, 113 runs, 92 RBI, and 12 steals, along with a 268 average, which is, totally acceptable. If you see that in him going forward, I like the age, I like the team context, and I like the floor with Swanson. And, I think of him as comparable to that Torres Baez tier as far as production, and he's going, a full 30 picks later. So yeah. He's kind of on an island in terms of ADP, because if you don't throw in Edman, the next shortstop is Correa at 131. So I think he's pretty good value if he falls anywhere past that 100th pick.
Yeah, and it's funny because he had a bad year, non-injury bad year in 2017, and I think because of the injury, people ever since have just kind of discounted him and looked at him as a failure. And 2017 was a bad year. I had him that year, and I kind of remember it well, and that's why I had the bias against Swanson. But I initially had him in the 4-star tier because I see growth here and the potential for improvement. And I think you're absolutely right. Like you could be looking at kind of a Javi Baez, year with a comparable average, and he doesn't quite have the swing and miss issues that Baez has. So yeah, I think and not to mention good lineup, good team, good park. I just feel like there's a lot to like in Swanson, and given the prospect pedigree, there's even a bit of a chance he has that like age 27 in his prime breakout,
Hmm.
and you're kind of buying into that too. So yeah, I think there's a lot to like here, particularly at the ADP, but just a solid player for me that I think I'm going to have on more than a few teams this year if I'm lucky. The rest of this tier, I think the two names in the middle there's questions around them, at least at their ADP for different reasons. So Carlos Correa, I was all over him last year. I had him in a lot of leagues, and he had that weird season where he was completely healthy, or at least for a 60 game season, and he wasn't good. He recovered in the postseason, but even so, it was just one of those head scratchers where it's like, yeah, I know it was a short season, and I know you can't really like look too much at 2020, but I just did not know what to make of him. But the big problem I have with Korea is that even if somehow he is healthy and puts it all together, there's just only so much here because he doesn't run. He ran right at the beginning of his career. It's not a huge power upside. Like you're not looking at like Seager with like 35 to 40 home run upside. You're probably looking more at like close to 30. And the average probably won't be great. So, and then there is the injury question. So even if everything works out for Correa, he has to stay healthy, which he generally hasn't done.
Yeah, it's really hard because I think finally he's fallen to a place where I can't really argue with this price, given that
No.
he has a legit kind of 5-star season in his past, even though it's now going to be 4 years in the rearview mirror, coming up on this season. So uh, I I could see, I guess my attitude towards Gray is more agnostic than anything else. He's still hitting in a good lineup in a good park for right-handed power. The short porch in left field in Houston. Um, I just don't. Yeah, I think we just have to adjust our expectations as far as what we're going to get, and it's going to be everyday kind of middle of the road performance without speed, and that is not exciting. But I could also see it being useful. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of mad on Correa, but that doesn't mean I'd avoid him completely.
Yeah, it's weird. So I wrote, when we're assigned pieces, and I during the postseason, so I wrote about him as one of my postseason players, and my favorite like little factoid about Correa, I pointed out like he played 58 out of 60 games in the regular season in 2020, and for a lot of players that wouldn't be a big deal. But for Correa, the last time in any regular season that he played like 58 games out of 60 was June 29th through September 6th in 2016. Like
Wow.
that's kind of mind-boggling. And I know for some players, they might sit like a game here, a game there, have a minor injury, but for him, it's just like he's just gonna miss time. Like I think that's kind of the thing with Correa in a full season. Um, you're probably looking at like 120, 130 games, like even if things go right. And so that's part of the problem. Like it just leaves that margin for error for him. It's so little. And it's a deep league versus shallow league thing too. In a shallow league, I'm kind of fine rolling the dice on Correa, and if he gets hurt, he misses time, I just pick somebody up. In a deeper league, you're going to be scuffling. In a 15-team mix like TGFBI, you're going to be carrying someone like Jose Iglesias or some placeholder who's going to, or Andrelton Simmons, who's going to produce but not really do much for you in the counting categories. And in it only, you're just going to be stuck with nothing. So yeah, and then so Marcus Semien, I think it's funny. People were probably a little too excited about him coming off of that career year. I don't know if people are too far down on him now. But yeah, it's just more 2019, even like pre-pandemic, was one of these things is not like the other. And you're the axe projection looks about right to me. Like 20 home runs, a shade over, 10 steals, a shade under, about a 250 average. That all feels like what Semien can do.
Yeah, I was definitely one of those who believed a little more in the 2019 than maybe I should have. I mean, he did really work hard on not chasing balls out of the zone, and that really was reflected in his increased walk rates and lowered strikeout rates. In the short season, he kept most of the walks. He gave back a lot of the strikeouts. Um, he was someone who talked pretty openly, if I remember, about how he was kind of mentally affected by baseball during the pandemic. So it's tricky because I'm fully willing to write off his 2020, but then what does that leave us, right? It leaves us the 2019 as kind of the basis for hoping that he can get back to being top 10 at the position. Um, I wonder if he's going to be, if he falls much further past this 140 ADP, I'd probably grab him because, he is in a much better team now offensively. We talked about the uncertainty with Toronto, but it looks like he's going to play every day. Um, so I guess if since Semien and Correa are very close to each other, I think I'd rather take a roll on Semien, I think around that price than Correa.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think at this price, and I believe Semien's ADP is a little bit lower. I'd rather have Semien, particularly if I miss out. Now what we're talking about is, if you've missed out on one of those top shortstops, I think to the point you made at the beginning of the podcast, John, if you already have a shortstop and one of these players is at value and it's your middle infielder, that's fine. Go for it. Have yourself a fun day. But if you haven't taken a shortstop yet, I think this is where, you're kind of reaching that decision time, like particularly in a mixed league where I'm not saying you have to have one of these players, but you're kind of running out of road here. Like the last player on the list here is Didi Gregorius, and I think Didi's solid. And I like the power he's kind of shown, but I don't know how much more ceiling there is in Didi Gregorius than what we've seen from him, in Philadelphia the last couple of years.
Yeah, everyday player. Decent lineup, good park.
Yep.
Um, the power is going to be in probably the low 20s.
The power is a surprise. Like you wouldn't expect, you would think that Didi's not much of a power hitter, but hits for power, even the batting average, like outside of that 2019 average has been pretty solid too. So yeah, he's one of those like solid, like everyday players. I think this is what he is, but he's in this tier because like what he is has been pretty reliable since 2017.
I mean, he is someone I wonder, just as an aside, with the news of the ball that's going to be in play this year, because he's not an exit velocity guy. I wonder if he's someone who could sort of disproportionately suffer from a ball that is, sort of dampens home run production by like 5%. Like that could be a difference of maybe, 3 or 4 homers, where with a lot of players it might only be 1 or 2. So I don't think it's anything you can overweight, or that you don't want to overweight it, but it's just something to keep in mind that he's not getting those 20 home runs on kind of brute power. I mean, he's getting a lot of, I'm just guessing. I'm not, well, actually I do have his StatCast plot up. Yeah. A lot of these
I'm looking. Yeah, I'm looking too at the.
Yeah, there are a lot of wall scrapers, and shots that are pulled right over the right field foul line.
Well,
so.
yeah, well, it's funny. The guy right next to him I was looking at is Marcus. Who we were just talking about is Marcus Semien,
Mm.
And Semyon last year, again, small sample, but average batted ball distance 10 more feet than Gregorius. So, right